Haiti has gone through so much struggle and so much strife. I have several people I know who are from there and talk to them often. And so my heart immediately broke and went out to them as well as their families. And um, what I did was, what my practice was, and I wanted to share this with you, was largely chanting. And um, for me, chanting has a particular kind of power, uh, not just for myself and for my mind, but really something that I can do in the midst of feeling helpless when something like this happens in the world, or when multiple things are happening in the world. So, um, and I thought that we would do a little bit of that this evening, with the intention in mind to send our response to the suffering, to the grief, the sorrow, and the violence and the trauma to the people of Haiti and the people here who have relatives in Haiti. Um, One thing I've learned is that people are having a hard time getting through to families, so there's also this the fear and the worry and all of that. So um, the first thing is suffering arises spontaneously. This is a universal principle. It's not just Buddhism. Suffering happens. Who can predict an earthquake like this? And of course, the buildings in Haiti are not retrofitted as they are in some parts of like California, where they move with the rolling earth. It's extremely expensive, and it takes tremendous amount of resources to do that. So naturally, when these buildings crumble, they're like poof, they crumble into ash. Um, so I sat down and began with, of course, the Om Mani Padme Hum, which is the chant of Avalokiteshvara, which is our sort of first response to any form of suffering, either within ourselves or suffering in the world. And what this does is it awakens within us this sense of deep caring in the midst of suffering. And it's more than empathy. It's more than just sort of sympathy or empathy, but it's really a deep understanding and a willingness to not look away and stand in the middle of the suffering with the person who is experiencing that. In Buddhism, we call this mind, this resolve, bodhicitta. And so some of you have heard this word many times before. Literally, it means the mind of awakening. And the mind of awakening, this quality of of really deep caring and a sort of a wish to be with someone in the midst of their suffering and help alleviate it, is is seen to be sort of also that which facilitates our own awakening. And we don't do it because I want to be awake, so I'm going to be compassionate. That's maybe sort of baked in a bit, but it's more important that the genuineness, the sincerity, the wholehearted caring of others who are suffering, that's where sort of the fruits of compassion lay, not so much in I want to be awake. Um, so it's also seen to be spontaneous. And so when I saw the news and I immediately felt this, like, oh gosh, my heart broke, immediately the bodhicitta impulse kicked right in. Now, what can I do? And often for people, this is the question. Well, what on earth can I do? We can easily feel helpless in the face of suffering of loved ones, of friends, or strangers on the street, much less on these sort of larger events, these big events in the world. And so, one takeaway from my work as a clinical chaplain, and there are many, but I think the one that is probably the most important in this conversation is the power of presence. And sometimes that can feel as if it's not enough. I feel like I need to do something. I need to act. The interesting thing here is you already know what to do. If there is anything to be done, you don't have to figure it out spontaneously. For example, you see someone sort of a truck backing up, and maybe an old elderly person sort of walking with a cane behind it. You don't have to reason out what you're going to do. You spring into action. You yell at the truck driver, and you rush forward to try to sort of help the senior not be hit by the truck. So this really happened to me in New York once, and It wasn't a thought. It wasn't like, I need to figure this out. We instinctively, I think, know how to be helpful when there is something to do. Now, we also want to be skillful, right? So helpful isn't always skillful, but that's not the point here. The point is that that inspiration to react and to help is already there if it's easy to know what to do. When it is not so simple as jumping in and trying to save someone from drowning or from, a burning building or what have you, um, it requires a slightly different response. And we know this, especially if we start feeling a sense of helplessness and concern and almost feeling like, oh my gosh, the world is so crazy right now. That kind of angst that comes with just not knowing how to respond or being unable to respond. So it's very important, and I teach this to my HDS students who are going into counseling and chaplaincy, and that is there can be this impulse to want to act, to want to do something and problem solve and fix it so people don't have to suffer anymore. And the truth is, we can't always do that. And so the first kind of the first response is that of being fully present, fully receptive to the person there, and being able to listen and share the space with someone and not look away and not be afraid of the suffering you're encountering. But this heartiness, this almost warrior spirit of your own presence that is fiercely loyal and caring, to be there with that person first as a compassionate, loving presence. So you don't have to do anything, but you want to get in touch with that aspect of who you are. And then through the process of bearing witness, of listening, of sharing the openness of your heart and receiving the suffering heart of another in the same space, we begin to have sort of a deeper sense of what might I do, if anything, to respond. And so the wisdom in responding is inherent in first being able to show up a certain way. Does that make sense? Otherwise, we become like the gallant young knight who jumps on his horse and goes galloping off in all directions. And how many people feel that way? It's not helpful. We need to sort of settle in and really be able to accompany others, even if we don't know these people, even if we don't sort of share the same space or aren't witnessing firsthand what's happening. Um, we can do this as a community and together. And this is why I wanted to do this tonight, was as a response for those of us here on the call, that we don't just have to do this by ourselves, but that we can actually help to reweave this jeweled net of our compassion, the power of one heart, of our love, and send it forward so that we don't feel alone in confronting challenges like this, but that we actually are able to radiate that out. In the process, maybe we are able to sort of have some thoughts about, if we're feeling called to actually do something about it for people, whether it's donate money or some other thing, call people that we know who maybe are Doctors Without Borders, whatever it may be. Chances are they're already there, or if they, but you get my point. My point is just that um, this Buddhist view of bodhicitta comes with two levels. One is called aspiring bodhicitta or aspirational bodhicitta, and the second is called action bodhicitta. So this quality of compassion, the resolve to care deeply and be moved, to be with suffering and alleviate it any way possible, comes with this aspiration, the devotion, the vow, the dedication. That's an internal thing. So that's where it begins. It begins with aspiring bodhicitta. This is what we aspire to, how we aspire to show up. The second one, action bodhicitta, involves the actual response, the actual thing that we might do. And if there is no direct response, we are encouraged to cultivate um, the perfections. The first one is generosity. Generosity. So whatever that may look like, patience, vigilance, and so on. Those are really largely the three. But the qualities of the perfections, um, which we've covered before, and we can always cover again, as well as actual skillfully helping someone who may be close to us or what have you. The point here is that what we send out matters. Where we're located matters, and the degree to which we can offer our care and concern as a community really matters. So we can do this on our own. As I said last night, I just sat there and I chanted for an hour. I chanted the compassion, Avalokiteshvara, the Om Mani Padme Hum, and just kept deepening and deepening that bodhicitta resolve to just open my heart and not shrink away from the death and from the suffering and the sorrow and the trauma, but rather the willingness. And this is a really important part of bodhicitta, is the willingness to engage, to receive it. And then the second thing I chanted was the Green Tara mantra, which is really sort of the invocation of a sense of protection and refuge in the midst of suffering. Also, Green Tara is there sort of to embody mercy, merciful compassion, like a mother with a child who is injured or crying. Um, and so we can awaken that within ourselves too, and bring that in our own aspiration of bodhicitta. So Green Tara being protection, refuge, the wish for those things for others. And then the medicine Buddha, of course. Medicine Buddha. Om Bekanze Bekanze Maha Bekanze Bekanze Rajaya Samungati Zoha. The healing chant that brings not just a sense of healing illness or any of that, but rather a sense of fortitude, a sense of resilience for the people, that they are still able to carry on and bring life back to normal as much as possible. So it's also a wish for strength, for healing the trauma, that it be something that is possible for them to do collectively, which is important in certain cultures. That's how healing happens from trauma, not in isolation or with a therapist, but as in community. And so the wish for the community to have that fabric of resilience and healing in the aftermath of this, and to grieve in a wholesome way, in a way where no one feels terribly alone, because it is such a profound community tragedy. And then the Amitabha chant, Om Ami Devari, which is the wish for brightness, luminosity. Um, and in this case, for me, again, energy, resilience, and the light of all love surrounding the people of Haiti going through this. So the Buddha Amitabha, the Buddha of infinite light. Basically, we've done this meditation before a while ago, I think back in January, where we experience all things as brightness, as luminosity, as luminous, including our own awareness. This we bring to them and wish for them to receive, to feel the light, whether it's the light of the divine or the luminosity of creation and of renewed life. Yeah. So those are the things. Now, when I chant those things, I chant them 108 times. So I have a string of mala, actually like these mala beads here. There's 108 beads. That's a sacred number in Hinduism and Buddhism. And as you go through, if you have a string of these, you can try this on your own. But you just go through each chant 108 times and then on to the next. Now, it can take some time, but it's as you keep going, the chant gets deeper, the roots get stronger, and you feel the resonance of what you're chanting getting deeper. So